My name's Steve, and I have a company called Colorado Wholesale Dye in Littleton, Colorado. We've been selling dye for tie-dye since about 1984. And so if you came into my shop in Littleton and didn't know how to tie-dye, this is the little presentation I'd give you to teach you how to tie-dye. What we sell are called reactive type dyes. And reactive dyes are the best kind of dye you can get for plant-based materials. Things like cotton or linen or rayon or hemp or anything that started out life as a plant and was woven into a fabric. A reactive type dye is the best kind of dye you can get for that kind of material. And the reason reactive dyes are so good on cotton is because they work through a chemical reaction where the dye becomes part of the fabric. So once you've dyed the fabric, and after you wash out the loose dye that didn't fix the fabric, no more dye will come off the fabric. So the dye is permanent on cotton. Like I could take this tie-dye and throw it in a laundry load of white clothes and the dye won't come off and ruin the laundry. So that's why you buy reactive type dye for tie-dye for cotton. The dyes don't work at all on things like polyester. Like this fabric, this t-shirt was sewn with polyester threads in the seams and they didn't dye at all. They just stayed pure white. So that's why any nice tie-dye you see is usually on 100% cotton fabric. Since these dyes work through a chemical reaction, there's a fixer chemical you buy that causes the chemical reaction that sets the dye. And the fixer chemical is a real common chemical called sodium carbonate or soda ash. At our shop we call it dye fixer. And sodium carbonate's like a main ingredient in laundry detergent or Mr. Bubble Bubble Bath. And that's important to know so you know you're not working with like asbestos or rat poison. But it's a strong alkaline like a strong soap. And we mix it up pretty strong and we dip things in it like our hands. So we wear gloves when we do that so it doesn't irritate our skin. But you're kind of like, sodium carbonate again is kind of like working with laundry soap, but a strong version. So anyway, it looks like this. And again, this dye fixer is the chemical that causes the chemical reaction that sets the dye. And when we tie-dye with it, we start out with this chemical and we dissolve it in a bucket full of water. And the recipe for this is we put 3/4 of a cup of this per gallon of water in a bucket. And then we take the shirts we want to dye and we soak it in this sodium carbonate water to get this chemical soaked in the fabric first. Then at our shop we sell a couple of other things that most people use with dye. And we mix those with water like in a separate pitcher, and they're called urea and lutegal. We usually take this urea and lutegal, mix it with water like in a pitcher. Then we use that pitcher of water to mix with our dye powder to make our colors. And we don't mix big buckets full of dye, we make small concentrated solutions of dye, like little cups full of dye. And when we mix up our dye, you will decide how bright and strong your colors are on your shirts by how you mix up your small concentrated solutions of dye. For example, this pink and this red are the same color of dye, just mixed at different strengths. This fuchsia color was our fuchsia dye, and it was mixed maybe about 4 teaspoons of dye powder per cup of that urea water, so a pretty strong mixture to get a deeper shade. This pink color was our fuchsia dye, mixed at say 1/2 teaspoon of dye powder or less per cup of that urea water, so a really light mixture to get a nice pastel shade. So the concept is you will decide how bright and strong your colors come out on your fabric by how you mix up small concentrated solutions of dye. So usually when we tie-dye, we have a couple different work surfaces. I like to have like a tying surface, and then I like to have a dyeing surface. And a tying surface might be a sheet of plastic on a table or a plastic table or something that makes common sense that you can tie your shirts up on. And then a dyeing surface, what I use is I cut up cardboard boxes and I lay flat sheets of cardboard everywhere, and I put my shirts to dye on that surface to dye them on. Okay. So, we're soaking the shirts in this fixer stuff to get this chemical soaked in the fabric first. Then we take the shirts out of this fixer bucket and we wring them out. We wring that wire back into the bucket because we can reuse it. Then we put the shirt on our work surface, our tying surface. So we'll have this damp shirt that we soaked in the fixer, put it on our tying surface, and then we twist it up or wrinkle it up or fold it up somehow to make a design. And I'll show you a few different designs. we start with a spiral because it's real easy and a common design to do, where we lay this damp shirt on our work surface. And I grab it in the middle. I grab it in the middle of the chest, not down here in the stomach or anything. I grab it in the middle of the chest and I just pinch it and I start twisting it up. Leaving it basically flat, I twist it up, and as I get to the edges, I kind of tuck them around. And I twist and tuck this in a flat dish shape like this. And then to bind the fabric, I like to use big, kind of wimpy, thin rubber bands, and I put them around the fabric like this, just to hold the fabric all together. Now, and I'll put 2 or 3 rubber bands to hold it all together. But in this kind of tie-dye, the twists and folds provide the pattern, provide the resist. Rubber bands for me are just there to loosely hold the fabric together while I'm working on it. So I don't use heavy rubber bands that tightly bind the fabric. I just use big, wimpy, thin rubber bands that just kind of hold my work in place while I'm working on it. Okay, so I tie up my shirt and then I put it on my little work surface like my sheet of cardboard that I'm going to dye it on. Now I've soaked the shirt in the fixer stuff, wrung it out, tied it up. I mix my colors in small concentrated solutions, and now I'm ready to dye the shirt. So I'm not going to take the shirt and dip it into the dye. What I do is I take the dye and I squirt it on the fabric using a tool like a squeeze bottle where I squirt the dye on, or I might use a pipette kind of thing, which is like a big eyedropper where I might mix the dye up in a cup, draw the dye up in the bulb, and squirt the dye on the fabric. So if I'm doing a spiral, what I do is I pretend like this circle's a pie, and I squirt the colors on like pieces of pie where it comes to a point in the middle and straight out like a piece of pie. And if I'm doing 3 colors in my shirt, like this shirt has, I'd have 3 pieces of pie, each one a different color. If I'm doing 6 colors, 6 pieces of pie. Or if I just want 2 colors in my spiral, I would just cut the pie in half and do half one color, half the other color. So I've got my spiral and I'm coloring my pieces of pie. Now the mistake most beginners make when they tie dye is they don't squirt enough dye on the fabric. So you want to color in your piece of pie, and then you want to saturate the fabric with dye so the dye really penetrates down into the shirt. So you have a mostly dyed shirt, not just like a shirt that's mostly white with a few spots of color. You want a mostly dyed shirt. So I saturate the fabric with dye. I put all my different colors on. Then I flip the shirt over. And I usually like to put the same colors in the same place on the other side of the fabric. So I saturate both sides of the fabric with dye. Okay, now I'm done dyeing the shirt. Now I'm going to leave it tied up. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm not going to untie it and look at it or anything. I'm going to leave it tied up and leave it alone until I'm ready for the last step in the dyeing process, which is now you're going to wash out the loose dye that didn't fix to the fabric. So when you're ready to wash out the loose dye, I leave the shirt tied up, and this is how I wash out the loose dye. Whether I'm doing 1 shirt or 100 shirts, I wash them all out the same way. I leave the shirt tied up. When I'm ready to wash it out, I take it to a sink and I flood it with cold running water. And a lot of loose dye comes out the fabric, and that's normal. And the cold flowing water carries away that loose dye, but keeps the colors from running together and keeps the white areas white. It takes a lot of rinsing to rinse out the loose dye. So you rinse and rinse till you kind of get sick of rinsing it. Then what I do, I have a normal top-loading washing machine that I fill with warm soapy water, and then when I'm done rinsing the shirts, I untie them and I throw them in the washing machine. And if I rinsed out a bunch of loose dye from a bunch of shirts, I can throw them all in the washing machine together. And I finish washing the loose dye in the washing machine by washing the fabric as many times as I need to in warm soapy water until I've washed out all the loose dye. And I know I've washed out all the loose dye when I look in the washing machine and the rinse water's clear instead of pink or whatever. So once you've washed out all the loose dye, you're done. Take them out, throw them in the dryer, you're done. You don't have to worry about any more loose dye coming off the fabric. So your goal when washing out the loose dye is to wash out all the loose dye, so you're done. Okay, so that's a spiral pattern. I'll show you a few other patterns real quick. I call this a marble pattern, where it's just kind of, a marble shade of dye here, where I soak the fabric in the fixer stuff, take it out, wring it out a little bit, leave it wet, then I put the shirt on my work surface, then you just wrinkle it up. Not in a ball or anything, just kind of flat wrinkle up the fabric. Then if you want, throw a couple rubber bands to hold it all in place. Then I squirt color over all the surface I can see. Down here I put all blue. but you can put whatever colors you want wherever you want. So that's real simple, just a marble pattern. Wrinkle it up, squirt the colors on. All right, then you let it sit, then you wash out the loose dye. Okay. You can do a stripe pattern. This is a V-stripe pattern. It's like a stripe of blue and stripe of yellow and orange. That's the stripes. And it's a V-stripe because it's coming in the stripes are coming in a V coming up the shirt. But I could have done vertical stripes or horizontal stripes or a rainbow or whatever. They're all done basically the same way, where I soak the shirts in the fixer stuff, take it out, wring it out real good, leave it wet. This shirt was folded in half so the sleeves are together. Then any kind of stripe pattern, what you do is pleat the fabric perpendicular to the way you want the stripes to run. So here I knew I wanted the stripes to run from like the belly to the shoulder, so when I opened it up it was a V. So I made a series of parallel pleats at right angles to that line. So kind of coming at an angle up the shirt. And how I make a pleat is I lay the shirt out nice and flat, and I just pinch it up and make a little pleat. I take that pleat and I kind of push it forward and gather those pleats together. And I do that, again, coming at an angle up the shirt, and I just pleat the shirt, coming all the way up the shirt. Then normally I put big thin rubber bands every inch or so to give myself guidelines where I'm going to squirt the dye. Then I squirt the colors on perpendicular to the folds. So I squirt the colors on, then I flip the shirt over, and I either put the same color in the same place on the other side or a different color in the same place on the other side. Then I let it sit for a while, then I wash out the loose dye. We're almost done, but it's important to know that the dye will spread out or flow out on the fabric in different ways depending on how wet the fabric is with that fixer water before you squirt the dye on. And when the fixer water, when the shirt's kind of saturated with that fixer water, so it's relatively wet, and you squirt the dye on, it'll kind of tend to flow out or spread out on the fabric in more kind of fiery, feathery, more interesting shapes. And if you're doing a marble pattern like this, you kind of want that to happen. You want the dye to kind of flow out in an interesting way. So when I want the dye to kind of spread wildly on the fabric, I keep it wet with that fixer water before I squirt the dye on. And how I do that is when I take it out of the fixer bucket, I just don't wring it out as much, so it's wetter, and then I wrinkle it up or whatever, and then I squirt the dye on, it kind of flows out better. Conversely, stripe patterns like this, they look a lot better when you have nice clean spots where the dye didn't spread wildly at all, just kind of stayed put where you put it. You get that by having a relatively dry shirt when you dye it. Now one thing I don't like to do is, I don't like to let the shirt totally dry out so it's bone dry, because when you do that, this fixer stuff kind of forms a crust on the shirt, and it'll interfere with the dye and the colors don't come out very good. So I never let the shirt totally dry out before I dye it. But if I want the dye to kind of stay put, I'll take it out of the bucket and wring it out as best I can. Then I might let it sit around for a little while so it dries out a little bit. And then I'll do my stripe pattern. And this stripe pattern, which is kind of a circle, it was folded so, kind of like you'd fold a paper fan. So it was still a series of parallel pleats at right angles to the line you want to dye. And so what I do is I kind of fan fold it from the middle here, and I fan fold it with a series of pleats all the way around, so it kind of looks like this. I still squirt the colors on perpendicular to the folds. And on this shirt, we squirted one color in one place on one side. Then when we flipped it over, we put a different color in the same place on the other side. And that's why the colors alternate on the shirt, like dark blue, turquoise, dark blue, whatever. So we dyed the shirt, let it sit, then we washed out the loose dye. So that's kind of a summary of just a quick lesson on how to do tie-dye without really showing you the dyes mixed up and stuff like that. In future videos, I'll mix up some dye and we'll do some real shirts. Thanks for watching.